Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Clive Thompson. I'm Chief Scientist at ALS. I've been involved in water and environmental analysis now for many, many years. I'm going to talk to you today about sampling, the needs for a protocol. My usual disclaimer applies. The views expressed in this presentation are solely those of me and not necessarily those of my employer, ALS. The older I get, the more Victor Meldrew-like I get. Also, just to let you know, this is going to be a very rapid presentation, but the associated secure PDF of this presentation with active web links will be available from ProEconomy upon request. Key issues. An unfit for purpose result is worse than no analysis result when making decisions involving significant potential health risks. The uncertainty of both the sampling and the analysis needs to be considered. Microbiology, with respect to both sampling and analysis, is an empirical technique where the actual method protocol used is likely to lead to significantly different results. Unlike, for instance, if you're trying to determine a very stable and very soluble substance such as chloride, you could do it by half a dozen different methods and you'd get more or less the same result with similar uncertainties. So the development of water safety plan, WSP, is also very important. I'll be talking about that in the new British Standard, and also briefly mentioning the issues of planktonic and sessile, that's biofilm bacteria issues. Summary of the presentation. So I'm going to first of all talk quickly about the new British Standard on water safety plans, potential Legionella sampling and analysis standard methods, sampling issues, sample pre-treatment and guidance for copper-silver disinfection, sample holding time stability studies, on-site micro sampling and analysis issues, and some conclusions. But the key thing is all taken samples and associated analysis results should be fit for the intended purpose. I'm now going to briefly talk about the new British Standard. So these are some of the standards that are available from British Standards. So, and these standards here are freely available on the web. And if you click this link, which I won't do now to save time, you can drag these down free of charge. These are also very good guidance documents. Again, you can click on there, drag them all down. There's many, many pages. The biggest problem is finding time to read it all, and even when you've read it, comprehension of it, memory retention, and selection of a relevant strategy. So going back to the water management plan, if you click on that, it will tell you, how you can get it from BSI, which I won't waste time doing. But this is a great step forward, and I think it is a very key document that you should be aware of. And right, the scope of it gives recommendations and guidance for the development of a water safety plan for all types of premises and all with water systems. So I'll let you read that. I won't read it all out to you. So you can see from that could be a good way for water safety plans. If you could get them interactively in a digital form, they'd be much more user friendly and maybe read and not just put in a cupboard and quietly forgotten. So as I say, if you want to read through this is the scope of the water safety plans. It's all on the PDF that will be circulated. So I think this is a great step forward. Sampling and analysis considerations. Right, what relevant standards are available as a basis for documented sampling and analysis methods? The answer to that is a lot. Which are the most relevant? Should the latest 2017 ISO 11731 standard be used? We'll come to that in a minute. The bottle size, sample size and volume processed. We mentioned that. The sample preservation and holding time issues. It's obviously very important. As soon as you take your sample, the preservative must stop all microbial activity. Otherwise, if it's carrying on while it's being taken to the laboratory, the result is not fit for purpose. Also, the result and limiter detection reporting you need to be aware of. And all methods, sampling and analysis, should be comprehensively validated. and there's a need for frequent liaison between labs and their clients, so they're on the same wavelength. And if you establish a friendly relationship, you'll find that that will be helpful to both parties. Right, some relevant sampling strategy questions. What, why, who, and how? What's it all about, and how important is it? Why is a documented strategy needed? If you're not traceable, your analysis isn't worth anything. Who should determine and develop it? What does it need to cover and include? What current existing standards should be considered? How and when should it be used? How to determine and comply with the regulator's views? And the key thing is staff competency. So in other words, if you've got to make sure staff are trained, but if they only use something very infrequently, like if they're using an on-site test that they only use very, very infrequently and doing it on site, are they, if you're not doing something on a regular basis, your competency might start to suffer. Also, UCAS have a reporting requirement under accreditation. If you click this, I won't bother now, it gives you the UCAS document. But in other words, what it's basically saying is all Legionella and all bacteria results should be not detected in so many mil or number of CFUs in the volume analysed. So in support of the above, a robust contract review is vital to ensure the volume analysed by the laboratory is suitable and appropriate to meet the customer needs. And if you look at sections A to this in the slide 21, this is a web link to the new Legionella SCA Legionella method, which is free of charge. That will explain it all. This is an interesting paper which I won't open up, but you can get that full article from there, which is resistance of Legionella and Acanthamoeba to heat treatment. But looking at the highlights, resistant of Legionella and Acanthamoeba, I won't pronounce the second word because I can't, to heat treatment from 50 to 90. Following treatment, 50 to 60, Legionella longbeachii and Legionella pneumophilia were both culturable. Cysts and tropophytes of Acanthamoeba obtained in samples treated at 50 to 90. Viability of all Legionella and Acantha species confirmed at 90. Expression of these various genes here decrease during co-culture. So what you've got, if you've got Acanthamoeba there, the sterilisation at the recommended 55-60 isn't necessarily, will not necessarily kill off all the Legionella. And I think also you've got cold spots as well. So this is a big issue. So an extract from that previous thing was that Legionella expression remains constant. Just a minute. Delete that bit. So what they're basically saying here, expression was not detected at 80 to 90 degrees C and in the co-culture. In conclusion, while heat treatments may reduce the number of viable Legionella species in monoculture, results indicate that in the presence of Acanthamoeba increases the virulence of Legionella during heat treatment. The virulence of Legionella in co-culture with Acanthamoeba species should be monitored in a water distribution where temperature heat is utilised for treatment. And this is where the advantage of copper silver lies. Potential Legionella standard sampling and analysis methods. There's a whole range of these, but you've got the Standing Committee of Analysts Blue Book methods. I'll explain those in the following 2 slides, and these are free of charge. There's British Standard methods. There's ISO N and ISO SEN BS standards methods. There's also a whole range of US methods, which I'm not going to cover. They're all backed up by validation and verification and accreditation by external bodies. This is the 2005 book from the SCA. I won't open it up to save time, but this is the new July 2020 Legionella method, and this is quite useful. And as I say, if you go down there, you can see the reporting issues are dealt with. Now, going back to the problems with the latest version of the ISO 11731, this is a standard, it's an ISO standard, and it has to go for a vote for all the countries. Now the UK, France and USA, and if you take the total population of the UK, France and USA, it's about 500 million people, you know, voted against this standard, but they were outvoted by the other ISO countries. There were some very small countries that voted, and it's not done on a population weighted. So this BSEN ISO version has a UK forward. If it's published by EN, we have to publish it, but we're entitled to put our own forward in to say, you know, why we disagree with it, which we did. And you can see if you read this, we have got the main problem we've got here. This is not so much a method; it's a guideline document. The standard has many potential variations and interpretations, not only between the method options, but between each specified method. So I'll let you read that in your leisure if you download the PDF. And you can see that you know, the UK has severe reservations about this standard, and this is an international standard that probably won't get revised for another 5 years. Also, now we've got the current version of the standard sampling, water quality sampling for microbiological analysis. This is the BSEN ISO 19458 2006. Is still current. It is being actually examined at the moment, but it will not be changed till at least somewhere in 2021. And it contains some serious incorrect information on silver neutralization using EDTA, which I'll come on to later. Basically, EDTA does not react very well with silver. It much prefers calcium to silver, and you've got a lot more calcium in your water than you have silver. So somebody got the idea that EDTA, it complexes copper wonderfully, but it does not like monovalent ions. The ISO, this standard, going on to it. So this standard here is cited in ISO, this ISO standard I just mentioned, actually cites that you should use this other standard, the 2006. And also mentions take care not to expose the samples to adverse temperature, freezing or overheating. So if you read all of this, which is common sense. So this is the summary of 2006, what it does. But it's obviously it is not applicable to water samples intended for microbiological. Sorry, start again here. This is the standard for microbiological analysis. So anything to do with transport and storage of water for physicochemical methods, you have to look at ISO 56673. And that isn't applicable for microbiological analysis. You have to use the ISO 19458. Now, ISO 19458 also states that between 0 and 45 bacterial reactions are proportional to the temperature. So if microflora is multiplying, the higher the temperature, the faster the multiplication. On the other hand, if it's dying, it's accelerating. The reaction is also accelerated by warming, but it is also important to realize if you ever freeze them, ice formation could be responsible for the death of majority of the cells, greater than 99%. So temperature, all I'm trying to say here is that temperature control is crucial. This is the current BS 7592 2008 for sampling. This is under review, last confirmed in August 2013, and also contains similar incorrect information about EDTA preservation, using EDTA for preservation. This is a very useful book that you can get, full paper on methodological approaches for monitoring opportunist pathogens in premise plumbing. Put my teeth in. A review. It is really worth reading. It's quite a complex paper, but you can get it from there. Some sampling background information. 3 consecutive steps are normally employed for sampling plumbing water. Turning on a tap or valve, adjusting the flow rate and collecting a prescribed volume of water using a sterilised container. Pre-flushing or post-flushing issues. Complex water usage patterns typify premise plumbing. Monitoring temperature and disinfecting levels of cold and/or hot water systems is a practical approach to identify points that are susceptible to pathogen colonization. The key thing on this slide is that the warmest point in a cold water system or the coolest point in a hot water system are likely to pose the greatest risk to Legionella growth. Any discrete sampling does not capture the actual dynamics of relevant pathogens in the water system, so never rely on a single negative result. Higher numbers of microorganisms are likely to be detected following stagnation or infrequent use. That's common knowledge. And as a result, disinfectant decay and microbial regrowth. First draw of water sample taken in the morning, so if you want the worst possible case. Right, going on to the BS one, sampling for Legionella code of practice. This is currently under review. It's applicable to sampling artificial water systems and also gives methods for sampling of biofilms and sediments that might be present. Some of the same sampling principles can be applied to natural water systems. The standard is applicable to both sampling for routine monitoring and in outbreak investigations. So I'll let you read that. Yeah. So I'll let you read that. This is basically what this covers. Carrying on here. But the thing you've got to watch is you must neutralize all biocides. Now, if there's organic biocides in there, they are difficult, or in some of them impossible to neutralize. But if you've got chlorine, chlorine dioxide, or copper silver, there are competent ways of doing this. But this is absolutely crucial. As I said earlier, that when present, biocides continue to exert their action and be effective after the sample's been taken. So if that is the case, you can have injured aerosolized bacteria are more likely to be revived when inhaled. So somebody's kind of been a smoker and they inhale that, they are likely to get Legionella. And these will not necessarily be revived in the sample when it goes on to artificial media. So the purpose of the sample is to enable the presence or absence of potentially infective Legionella to be determined at the time of sampling and not at some time after the biocide has continued to be effective. So that is crucial. And as I've said earlier, EDTA, there's a number of standards saying you can use EDTA even as little as 10 milligrams per litre, and that is completely wrong. And it actually says 10 milligram per litre might be less effective in hard water. It's totally ineffective, take my word. It prefers calcium and silver. And also, if you've got EDTA in plastic bottles as a preservative, if you put them through gamma ray radiation, it decomposes the EDTA, it all turns greeny brown. So it's not a good thing. Also says silver can be inactivated using sodium sulfide. I don't think anybody uses that. It's a nasty, smelly reagent. It's very unstable, and it's got a statement sodium thioglycolate has been used. We can give a concentration, and that's another smelly reagent you don't want to. Very unstable. So as I said earlier, many organic biocides, there's no suitable neutralizing agent. And if that's the case, a note should be added to the actual sample stating this. But when you're sampling slimes and biofilms, a neutralizing agent is not generally necessary because of the high organic load. It will kind of neutralize it. There's a quick paper here that, in other words, if you do not add the right preservative or miss it, false negative results can lead to a false sense of security. Finally, I managed to get this in the latest version of this document here, part B of HTM. That I won't do this. We finally managed to get this in at the very last minute. It was nearly published. I had a hell of a fight to get this in, but it now clearly states, however, EDTA has been found to be totally ineffective as a neutralizer for silver and therefore should not be used in any bacterial test, including Pseudomonas and Legionella. Sampling and sample transport. Correct sampling procedure and associated training. Sampling and preservation for chemistry analysis, you've got to consider sampling and preservation for microbiological analysis. I've done this one to death, EDTA versus sodium sulfate. right containers, there's correct storage conditions, refrigeration, keep in the dark, etc., maximum holding times, and how do you sample biofilms. So this is the ISO 17031, as I said earlier, recommends to use this out-of-date standard. So that is a bit of a, I won't bother. This shows you that this is just a quick slide to show how the EDTA and the sodium thiosulfate neutralize Legionella. This is a slide telling you a sampling and preservation advice. So while monitoring for Legionella is considered appropriate, the sampling methods should be carried out in accordance with BS 7592, and if used where possible, water samples should be tested in UCAS accredited laboratory that takes part of the water microbiology proficiency scheme, such as that run by the Public Health England. The laboratory should also apply a minimum theoretical mathematical detection limit of less than 100 or less than 100 Legionella bacteria per litre for culture-based methods. So that's what's stated in. I'll let you read that. As I say, but the transporting and storing of samples at temperatures below 6 might reduce subsequent recovery of Legionella because the bacteria might be induced into a non-culturable state. So you do not put them, you do not store them below 6 degrees C, and they should be delivered to the laboratory, preferably within 24 hours, but not more than 48 hours. This is what it says in 2008. Trying to get guaranteed 24 hours can be a bit demanding. This standard here says this is for determination of Legionella. This one says otherwise cool samples, ideally 5 to plus or minus 3 during transport. So there is some, as I say, there is some variation on these. I'll let you read this one. This is sampling for microbiological analysis on this 2006 standard. This standard here again, as I say, has still got these statements that have been in here that aren't necessarily true, and this will remain current until at least 2020. This is an interesting paper here on effects of holding time and measurement error on culturing Legionella in environmental water samples. And I would suggest you try and, if you can get hold of a copy of it, I don't think you can get it off the web. It's behind a pay barrier, but it is quite interesting. And it mentions a previous report saying that Legionella sample results due to shipping and delays. A previous study reports a large amount of Legionella sample results due to shipping and delays in sample processing. Specifically, this same study, without accounting for measurement error reports, more than half of the shipped samples had Legionella levels arbitrarily changed up or down by 1 or more logs, and therefore the authors attribute this result to shipping time. So that's a previous paper which I haven't given you, but according to this study, we determine the effects of a sample holding shipping time while taking into account the measurement error in measurement. This first paper in 2014 didn't do that, which has previously not been addressed. They analysed 159 samples split into 16 aliquots, of which 8 were processed promptly after collection. The remaining 8 were processed the following day to assess the impact of shipping time. A total of 2,544 samples were analysed, including replicates. After accounting for inherent measurement error, we found that the effect of holding time on observed Legionella counts was small and should have no practical input on the interpretation of results. Holding times increased the root mean squared errors by only 3 to 8%. Notably, only 1 out of 159 samples to the average of the 8 replicate counts changed by 1 log. Thus, our findings do not support the hypothesis of significant greater than 1 to the log 10 Legionella colony changes due to holding. As I say, one thing now very quickly. Laboratory microbiological tests are typically UCAS accredited to 17025. This should ensure full result traceability. There's some rapid micro methods that are not accredited and often can be carried out on site. This is my opinion now. Most of the tests of this are not accredited, and what would you base, what action do you take based on the result of a non-accredited test? It's not fully traceable. How do you know the result is valid or correct? The next slide is a very brief snapshot of how accredited laboratory assures that the reported results are valid. So these are all the checks that a laboratory has to do. And if you just do a quick test on site, to give yourself comfort, how can you be sure that if you get a negative, it is a true negative, and the person doing it is competent to do it on a regular basis? And a key question, would you be prepared to stand up in a high court to defend your submitted results from an accredited test? Conclusions. Consistent best practice of advice is needed on sampling. Consistent best practice advice is needed on sample transport conditions and maximum sample holding times. Consistent and correct advice on the use of biocide neutralizing agents is needed to ensure adequate sample preservation. If new standards cite previous standards, efforts should be made to ensure the older standards are still relevant. The use of fit for intended purpose Legionella and other potential pathogen analysis methods is essential. If there is not a suitable neutralizing agent for the treatment agent employed in the water system, then a note should be recorded on the sample stating the name and dosage details of the biocide used. A level playing field is required for all sampling and analysis of water in buildings. Thanks for listening.